the Lost Pines Groundwater Conservation District, January 2024, 7 p.m. Public Library Civic Center, Edmond, Texas. I want to welcome all of you. I also say that our new county judge, Frank Holiday, is present. Would you stand up? Congratulations and thank you for being with us tonight. Before I go to the next agenda item, I do want to call to your attention that at the top, right below where it says agenda, it says the subjects to be discussed or considered may be taken in a different order, which they are shown on the meeting notice. And I've discussed this with legal counsel. I had multiple requests for public comments before the elections, so that's what we're going to do. In addition to that, please note this. We have executive sessions on 3 items tonight. It's going to be very lengthy. We don't want to keep the public here for hours and hours. So basically, those 3 items are going to be moved to near the end of the agenda. So if you'd like to make note, item 5E, 5H, and 5I will be immediately following number L. Yes. Yeah, and the reason for that is not just because it's long, it's because this room will have to be vacated, which means you would have to be outside. So we thought it would be kind of us to take care of this at the end of the meeting when I don't think very many people may have an interest in what we're discussing. We will come back to order if any of you do wish to wait outside, but I just wanted to let you know that. Yeah. Mr. Cook was asking me if there's any other business. There will be announcements, our meeting schedule for the year, and date and time of the next meeting, consideration of future agenda items. Those are the only things that will be done after we vote. But there will be votes. There may be votes on these items, and there may not. I cannot promise you that. Does that answer your question?
Absolutely.
Mr. Don Hardy.
Not for Mark, but Mark.
Okay. Any other questions? I'm really sorry. I'm first. I'm going to say some things that are kind of insulting, and I don't mean for them to be, but sorry. Don't worry. You know when people say, "Wow, you look great," I don't care that everyone suggested that you've aged so poorly. You really look fantastic. And it's that kind of backhanded comments that I've got to make. And it's about the presidential, I guess it's, is there a presidential race tonight? I'm not sure, but I haven't kept up with everything. But I've got some comments about that specifically. When Mike Talbot was on years ago, I remember being very nervous about Cheryl taking over because I thought she was a sweet, genteel Texas lady who might be a little bit too nice for the suits coming in from Austin. And I guess now we all know better. But y'all know her better than I do. But I think she's done a great job. She's got backbone. She's very knowledgeable. She's experienced. She's been very involved. And coming from Lee County, that has only 17,000 people in the entire county, and I'm in northern Lee County, which is even less populated. We're pretty insignificant.
Right, motion passes.
But we worked on this. We had a stakeholder committee. She got very involved and showed her commitment to that.
Discussion.
Everywhere I've gone, whether it's Senate hearings, symposiums, or the Austin ASR meetings, I see her everywhere. And I've seen many of y'all other places as well. But it seems like she is involved with everything. You know, she has committed so much time to the District of Texas. So for anyone that's running against her as president, because I really don't think we could do better, not to blow smoke, but I don't think we could do better than Cheryl. But for anyone else that wants to be president, I would ask the most important thing to me, because I've been so involved and spent so much time on it, is do you support a stakeholders committee? That's the one thing that's very important to me. But I would also say that her sweet disposition, for those that don't know her really well, her fortitude, her experience and her knowledge, and her proven time commitment make her best for the job. And anyone else that wants to take that position, and if you put in that much time,
You had public comment on
sorry. Anyway, thank you all for your time.
Thank you, Donna.
I just share with y'all, there's, I got an invite
Nancy
today
McKee?
for Lee County. On February 28th, there's going to be what they call a Lee County Day at the Capitol. And they're going to have a charter bus right there in Lee County at the courthouse, take you over to the Capitol. Representative Gerda's staff will greet you, tour you around the Capitol. You'll be recognized by the House of Representatives when they begin their session. Then you'll have a box lunch and then go and meet with Senator Kokor's staff and then be recognized by the Senate there. And that's all citizens in Lee County. So I just throw that out as an opportunity for the board members from Lee County to participate in the legislature, meet Representative Gerdes and Senator Kokors. If it so happens that all 5 members from Lee County decide to go, you would want to put out some notice about, you know, the 5 of you, a potential quorum is doing something, but you aren't going to make any decisions. So anyway, I just wanted to make sure y'all knew about that. That's February 28th, starting at 7:30 in the morning, and they get you home by 5.
That being the sitting president was invited to speak to the House Natural Resources.
Any other announcements?
Which established an important
Drinking phase of water law conference
session
February.
and helping to let legislatures aware of
22nd?
all kinds of concerns for citizens and our precious
23rd and
groundwater
24th. And
and making them
typically we have
aware.
a couple of directors.
I have just obtained the House Natural Resources interim report to the candidate legislature. And the Senate Committee on Water.
Not this year, I got a pass, but April Griffin is
Both
giving
of
the case
which
law
have
update.
significant references and recommendations regarding
Any
mitigation,
other announcements?
prevention of waste, of groundwater,
All
and
right, with
groundwater
that, we'll move on
conservation.
to item
And now we see for the first time.
discussion,
the
consideration, and
establishment
possible
of a
action on
House
district
Water
board
Caucus
meeting
composed of
calendar.
38 legislators
There
to
was
place
a
water
calendar of
as a
dates
top priority
in
this
the
session.
packet for the remaining year for this year,
Another
2023. Any
Positive
discussion
movement for
for?
litigation programs.
Everybody good with that?
You recall
Okay.
that lost times mitigation programs were
You're
suspended.
gonna miss the August meeting?
Mitigation is now been
Okay.
given a sympathetic ear,
Okay.
working with the legislature to change permits that would require the permit holders to pay for mitigation via export fees. In fact, you have before you a copy of the proposed
Okay,
bill.
so-
Tonight's board packet.
Will everybody agree with the 13th, we'll move the 13th instead of the 20th?
Are excited because I see the Texas
Okay, so
legislature
we'll
is
see if we
trying
make that
to
change
give regard to the
on December
watershed.
13th.
The time
instead
is
of the 20th.
right, but it will require a
All
unified
right.
front by the board.
Moving on to O, set date and location of next meeting. That is February 15th
So very
in
respectful
Giddings,
and
at the Giddings
I ask this board to
Council.
please consider allowing the current president to
City Council Chambers,
another
beginning
year
on the 15th
while the
of
legislature is in
February.
session,
All right,
to allow
P,
continued
consideration of future agenda items.
we've experienced in this last year.
Anyone?
Thank you, Nancy. Frank Molinek?
I didn't have anything, somebody just told me to sign in, so I.
Oh, okay. All
I
right.
just want to say that I support what y'all are doing, and I'm just here to listen and learn.
We appreciate that, thank you. Linda Curtis?
Everything else with general counsel. For September, October, November, it was over $25,000. And so I'm going to look at that board medicine. And again, I don't think this is stuff that's going to happen all the time. I'm Linda Curtis, I'm speaking of whatever I can think together, I will bring it.
And I want to congratulate the staff, board members, general manager, and attorneys on a terrific year, and thank you for your
Is that something
very
you-
hard work.
Sure, the
and
financial
dedication
committee
and
might
I
also
want to make sure.
help out possibly.
What is happening in.
Any other consideration for future
Extraordinary,
agenda items?
He just referenced what's going on in the legislature.
All right, I
The
see no
caucus
further business.
on
The
water
meeting is
and
adjourned
this
at
is
11:06
made
p.m.
As an independent. Democrats.
Get your cupcakes.
Some really good things. I'm just a keen observer. I have nothing close to the experience that Greg Ellis has on legislative experience, but I wanted to, or expertise, but I wanted to make sure that y'all know how gracefully and forcefully Nancy McKee brought the elephant into the hearing room last November to Senator Perry in the Senate Committee on Water. I refer to the 527,000 acre feet of water lost in leakage in 2021 in the state of Texas, 43,000 acre feet of which was lost in San Antonio, the very same place where they just pumped 50,000 acres of our water down to, right? So it's in the record, but will Vista Ridge ever be audited and cut back? It's our question at LIB and everybody else's in our community, as well as what are we going to do to protect the aquifers and rivers for the future and in the face of now encountering pollution, which you're going to hear about tonight. So please, let's be honest with ourselves. The legislature is captured by a vision of the Texas miracle, which is turning into the Texas nightmare, having used water, development, and economic subsidies to keep bringing 1,000 people a day to Texas. Any 4-year-old will tell you that is not sustainable. My plea to the board is this: please complete the work that you started and make sure you have the leadership in place to get it done. As far as I'm concerned, y'all should stay where you are, because we're going into a legislative session. We need this board to unify. I've been to meetings, I've seen the tension, I know that not everybody gets along. Such is life in any organization I've ever been part of. So please, just get through your differences, unify your board, and make sure we are ready to go. And we're in session, guys. Let's go. Have a cupcake and relax. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. Hugh Brown?
That's the third one over 3 minutes.
I have the option not to have over 3 minutes. It's in the rules.
I'm Hugh Brown, y'all know who I am, and I'm from the Giddings County. Now, I'm not gonna go into detail like all of these other people, but you folks are great, okay? We got that covered. Now, what I wanna say is, last time when I was meeting this week, you had some water experts with you brought in here, and the question I've been raised about at what point does water falling as rain belong to the landowner? At what point does the state have its hands on it? We got an answer to that. And the answer is apparently, if you go look at the topographic map, it's got little blue lines where the creeks are. If the water's in that little blue lines, the state's got its finger on it. Until then, we can do what we want with it. So now we look like we got that issue settled. So now we can figure out about recharge augmentation, what we do with the water, where it is, what we do with it. Okay, that's what I want to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Hugh. Emma Smith?
What is your time limit, please?
It depends on what, if you want to read the rules. It says that I have the option of going beyond 3 minutes if I wish.
I'm just asking you, how far are you going?
So far, everybody's gone but 4 minutes. I don't have a limit.
The first 3 is gone over.
I know that, Mike.
I just want to know how long it gets, so I know that time.
I don't have a set time.
Okay, so they can say whatever they want to do.
No, eventually I would ask people to summarize. Eventually I would. You know, it depends on how many people are speaking.
How many times?
Excuse me, Emma, would you please go ahead? Sorry.
Good evening. So I, along with the 60 other members who have signed the letter I will pass out later, did so to express our sincerest gratitude for the work that you did as current board members, and especially that you, President Smith, helped to do this year. I confidently speak on behalf of the other 60 members, along with countless residents of Lee County, when I say the work of this organization implementing practices and policies that work to better recognize private property rights, groundwater ownership, and the conservation, preservation, protection, and prevention of groundwater waste is extremely appreciated. We are all reassured by the leadership that has been demonstrated by this board this year. Thank you.
Thank you, Emma. Okay, the other ones that I only have for other agenda items. That's Andy Ware and Skip on it, is that correct? Yes, sir?
Yeah, I'm skipping that. It's just for general public comment.
Oh, yeah, yours is not on the agenda. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Skip,
Yeah, I'm
please.
Skip Cadet, co-founder of Friends of the Land, and I have a farm in Will Barber Bend. And I'm here just to voice support for the work that our Valley Stewardship has done. They've been working with us at Will Barber Bend, most recently with Elon Musk Boring Company and all the stuff that's happening over there. They have a TCEQ public hearing that we've helped get to discuss the wastewater treatment plant that they're trying to get passed there, and it's right above the alluvial aquifer. I'm very concerned about that going eventually in the aquifer, obviously. Steve's work with pollution, I think, is really important to do with these forever chemicals. Getting a baseline is important to have just for future reference. We're also concerned about, and just to alert you what's going on with Barber Bend. Tex-Mix Concrete has now almost 1,000 acres they've bought there, and they have 2 permits to start mining, and both of the stormwater permits allow them to go into the Colorado River. So there's a lot happening over there. It's going to affect, obviously, the surface water, but eventually the groundwater as well. And Steve has done a lot of work there, and I'm here to support him and tell you that he does good work. And we need more of that, specifically because also the LCRA gauge at Utley has not been monitored, tested for about 4 or 5 years. There's no data there. I'm going to go to the LCRA and find out why that is. But now with all this development there on that bend, it's even more critical that we get that monitored. So I'm just here to support Steve's work, and hope you all can do it.
Can I ask a question, Skip?
Sure.
I read the report today, and it said that if a person ate 1 fish, can't remember how much time, that it could impact them seriously. Has there ever been like a public health advisory not to eat the fish in the Colorado River?
There should be. I'm not going to get desperate.
No, but I was just curious, shouldn't, I mean,
That's
yeah,
a good
no,
point.
I totally support the work as well.
Once we get more monitoring, we can see about how bad it actually is.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Okay. Okay, we will now go to what was item number 2, pursuant to Board Rule 2.1A. The board will conduct its annual election for president, vice president, and secretary treasurer.
I have a motion.
Oh, okay. Well, I will open it, and I will open it for nominations.
Yeah, I'd like a motion that we retain our current slate of leadership for 1 more year. I think Cheryl and Kay and Elvis have done a tremendous job leading the board and making the necessary changes and improvements that everybody has commented on. I've got a lot of experience serving on boards. One example, I was elected president of the Texas Academy of Science. But before I became president, we had a transition where I was vice president, president-elect, president, and then past president. And despite that experience as vice president and president-elect, I didn't accomplish near as much as I wanted to in my 1 year as president. There just wasn't enough time to complete the initiatives, and once there was a leadership change, my ideas went by the side, and the new president came up with his plans. I think the current board and the progress we've made this year in addressing the TCEQ audit and addressing those issues that was pointed out by TCEQ many of the other initiatives that Cheryl has launched. And one of the things I'm seeing is it's hard to accomplish a lot in a one-year term. And that's why a lot of organizations are going to two-year terms for their presidents, because they recognize 1 year is just not long enough. So I think this current leadership with the Lost Pines Groundwater Conservation District needs 1 more year to finish up all those good things that they've started. And, you know, and a final point, you know, if the board wants to make some changes, hold your pants on it. 1 more year is not going to bust your britches, and I think this current board deserves 1 more year. So that's my motion and my justification.
President Smith, could I make a point of clarification? There could be a second to the motion, but without bylaws on the process for elections, we're relying on Robert's Rules of Order, and that dictates that you open the floor to nominations. So if Director Arsufi wants to convert this to a nomination process, that would be in line with Robert's Rules of Order.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that last bit, Natasha?
Sure. If Director Arsufi wants to convert this to a nomination of the current slate, that would be consistent with Robert's Rules of Order.
So I can make that nomination and also make a recommendation that we close nominations.
The president would be the one to close nominations.
Gotcha.
I'd like to make a nomination too.
So the president would call for nominations. Ideally, it's done for each office. And there are 3 offices up for election tonight. And so the president calls for nominations, asks if there, receives them, asks if there are any more. Hearing none, she then closes the nomination.
So Kay does not accept Tom's nomination to accept the full slate. So Kay has the right to do that, is that correct?
No, that's not what I said. So he can nominate for president. And then if you ask if there are any further nominations, and then Kay can make a nomination.
So
and
he
then
cannot make a nomination for a full slate?
Well,
Because that's what Mike Talbot used to do every year. That's why he thought he could do it.
Well, I'm recommending you follow Robert's Rules of Order and do this for each office.
Why is that? I don't understand.
I don't either.
Why I
Things keep
can't
changing,
nominate
depending on
a
who's in
full
charge.
slate?
Well, because you don't have bylaws and the statutes and the rules don't weigh in on the election process. The board can vote on, that's true, the board can vote on the procedure that you take tonight. So if you want to make a motion, Mr. Arsufi, to proceed with the motion or the nomination for the slate, the board can vote and to see if they accept that. That's not an acceptance of the slate, that's just an acceptance of the process.
Okay, so I do that.
Yes, so there would be action to,
And does that require a second?
yes, it does.
I will second that.
Any more discussion or comments?
Tom, your motion reflects my sentiments almost exactly. And if Alyssa hasn't beaten me to the second, I would have seconded that.
Any other discussion?
Council,
Yes.
does the chair conduct the election?
Yes, the current presiding officer conducts the election.
And if I'm not reelected, then I finish after the secretary treasurer and then the president takes over. That's correct. Okay, Tom's motion is that we adopt a procedure where he can institute a slate nomination, is that correct? Okay, all in favor? Aye. All opposed?
No.
Okay, would y'all raise your hands, please? All in favor?
Could we do a roll call, or raise of hands is
Need a
fine.
roll call vote.
Okay. Elvis, what's your vote?
No.
Tom?
Yes.
Okay.
No.
Melissa?
Yes.
Yes.
No. 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 No.
Okay, thank you. Motion fails. All right. Tom, did you have anything else you wanted to say?
I'm disappointed in the board. It seems that we're getting rid of a good president over petty crap.
To clarify, that was just a vote on the process. That was not a vote on the appointment or election of president.
So I'm reopening nominations.
You could take another motion for the process that I described.
And it failed.
No, Mr. Arsufi's process failed.
That's what I said.
Right, I was saying that you could, if Kay wanted to make a motion for the process I described under Robert's rules, she could do so.
Okay.
Could we even take that motion up? It's not in the agenda,
Yes, the election isn't on the agenda.
but not changing the rules.
You're not changing the rules, you're just adopting a process to conduct the election by. And without it in your rules or bylaw, which we don't have, you can adopt a process right now.
Yeah, we don't have rules that cover elections right now, but we certainly need them. Okay, I am reopening the floor to nominations.
Which office?
President.
I nominate Elvis Hernandez for president.
Can we have a justification for that?
Nope.
I nominate Cheryl Smith.
Are there any other nominations? If not, I'm closing the nominations and there will be a vote. Billy Sherrill? We're voting now. Billy Sherrill, do you vote? Well, let me start over. All for Elvis Hernandez? Excuse me, I'm getting myself confused. I'm going to vote for Elvis first and me second.
You want to vote for Mr. Hernandez?
Okay. Mike Samang?
Hernandez.
Mr. Hernandez. Mr. Hernandez.
And I vote for myself.
Smith.
Elvis.
Smith.
Hernandez.
Okay, Elvis is won at 6-4. Thank you very much. And I do appreciate those of you that stuck by me through thick and thin.
What's with the name callings here? I really don't need to be the name calling, okay?
What? That is not being called.
Asshole and pathetic, you just call it.
Okay, any nominations for vice president?
I nominate Ms. Kay again for president.
Are there any other nominations? If not, nominations are closed. Elvis,
Excuse me.
your vote. Kay was the only one nominated. The nominations are closed. Now I'm taking a voice vote. So how do you vote?
Yes.
Tom?
No.
Kay?
Yes.
Melissa?
Yes.
Phil?
No.
Larry?
Yes.
Herb?
Yes, Ms. Kay.
Mike?
Yes.
Billy?
Yes.
Okay. Ms. Kay still remains as vice president. Finally, we have secretary treasurer.
Mr. President,
Yes.
I would like to put in a nomination for Mr. Mike Zinay for the
Secretary?
secretary.
Okay. All right. Are there any other nominations for secretary treasurer? All right, then I'm closing nominations. Billy, and this is a voice vote for Mike Smack. Billy?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
Herb?
Yes.
Larry? Phil? Phil?
Yes.
Melissa?
Yes.
Kay?
Yes.
Tom? Elvis?
Yes.
All right, motion carries. So we have a new set of officers, and congratulations, Elvis, congratulations, Kay, and congratulations, Mike. I wish the best of luck to you, and I will support you however I can. So Elvis, would we do a switch here?
I don't think we
I recommend just like a 2-minute recess while we transition.
Bill.
I think it's on the internet. I got that information about the drawdowns and the DFCs and that, and John Eagleman as well.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
That's the kind of stuff I want to see.
That's the kind of stuff that Bill produces, so.
Okay. Well, I appreciate what he's done.
He, we got ready to produce a report. He asked me what I wanted. I said, I want you to do what you do everywhere else, you know, in every other district.
We're on the right track.
So that's,
I like it.
oh, very good.
I like that a lot.
I will let him know, if you know.
Oh, okay, that was perfect.
So I've done it in Wisconsin, in Washington, second one. In May, Colorado, someplace else. August is, hey, I gotta do something that if I don't, I'll get angry. I said too much.
Everybody thinks they know how to do it, but nobody does it right.
It's going smoother than the Speaker of the House, so, you know,
That's
a little hurdle to clear, but.
Not that you want to compare yourself to Congress.
I'm just saying it could be worse. We could have been back here next month doing it again.
The way your board is set up, it easily could have been 5, 5, 5, 5, 5, 5, 5, 5, 5, 5 for the next 5 hours.
I thought that might be how it broke.
Yep.
Okay.
Oh, there are cupcakes.
You want one? Chocolate or?
I got pecan pie. No, we can beat it. Got a bakery.
Okay, if we could start the meeting back up at 7:38 p.m. The next item on the agenda is the consent agenda. Any of the directors have any questions or want to bring out highlight anything from the consent agenda? Okay, other than that, I'll entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda. Second.
I have a question. Can I ask a question?
Sure.
I saw that Greg Ellis's invoice was handed out. Is that part of it? Is that, Greg, there was an invoice for your services?
So there was an invoice that came in after the packet went out for the December board meeting. And there was a question via email about that invoice had been paid, but it's paid under the contract predates the purchasing policies. But
Okay.
we distributed the invoice just for the board's record.
Okay, just wanted clarification.
I'm pretty sure I've been paid.
Paid or not paid?
Paid.
Paid.
I just wanted clarification. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, hearing a motion and a second. I guess we'll have a vote. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed?
I usually get my legislative payment before.
Hearing none, the motion passes. Next item on the agenda, we're moving to regular agenda number 5A. Discussion, consideration, and possible action on the district hydrologist scope of work and related 2023 expenses. If you recall, last board meeting, so it was about 5 weeks ago, our hydrologist gave a presentation, and in that presentation there was several phases of studies and projects, and I believe I know the committee, the management committee, met to discuss that. So with that, Director Cole, if you can.
I don't know if this is on or not, but yes, the management committee addressed the LRE proposal, and in order to streamline the project's implementation, we decided to recommend to the board the approval of phase 1, phase 2, and the hydrogeologic models so that Jim can coordinate with LRE in moving forward with an improved scope of work subject to the annual budget limitations, but acknowledging that the associated dates are not included.
Thank you.
Is that a motion?
Sure.
I second it.
Any discussion on the scope of the work? So we're talking about phase 1 and phase 2 and the hydrogeological model that was presented. And it's the studies listed in those phases, not necessarily the dates. The dates may change a little bit here and there. And this has already been planned for, so the budget and last year the Treasury Financial Committee and this board approved the 2023 budget, where we increased the budget for the hydrologist in preparation for this. So financially, we are prepared, and so Director Rogers.
So are you saying that some of the tasks may be shuffled around to different dates?
Yeah, a little bit, yes. And the general manager, it'll be up to Mr. Tottenham and how, to position those different studies on how urgent they are, and he'll prioritize them.
We're also going to look maybe this summer at phase 3, just depending on how phase 1 and 2 are going. That's the plan, right?
But right now, the motion is on the table for to proceed with phase 1, phase 2, and the hydrogeological model. Any other discussion? Sure.
I'd like to compliment for the committee on that. It's breaking up in phases rather than just blank check the whole.
Under Jim's supervision.
Yeah, and we're going by the phases as proposed by the hydrologist, but it was based on input from that committee, provided a list of priorities, and then the LRE, our hydrologist, put together that timeline and that proposal. Any other further discussion? Having Having heard a motion and a second, all those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion passes. Next item on the agenda is B, the discussion, consideration, and possible action on publishing notice for a public hearing on the amendments to the district rules. Again, if you recall, last month on December 8th, the district held a public meeting to review rules. We received feedback from the public, and Natasha has prepared an update on those rules. So please check your email, because Natasha has sent an update to the rules and a memo, an associated memo. So take a look at that if you can. No, she sent that out like last week. I believe it was. But what we're here for today is to proceed to give the staff and the district the green light to proceed on the publishing notice, to have a public hearing in March 15th for the March board meeting, to also have a public meeting on that date. So this is just to give the staff the action item to authorize them to make that publishing notice public. We need at least a 30-day advance notice. So,
Elvis, I'd like to make a suggestion.
Sure.
Because we don't know for sure if the staff can reserve the proper place. So my suggestion is shoot for the 15th, but delegate to the staff the authority to go a few days either way. Does that sound okay?
Yeah, you don't need a date. I mean, we don't even need to put a date for that. Just leave a motion without a date, and we just need a motion to publish the notice for public hearing on the amendments to the district rules.
I move to direct the district staff and legal counsel to finalize the proposed rules with the management committee and publish notice for a second public hearing on the proposed rule amendments on or about March 15, 2023.
I'll second that, please.
Okay. Hearing first and a second. All those for? Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion passes. C, presentation by the district hydrogeologist regarding desired future conditions. Mr. Bill Hutchinson.
Doctor.
Thank you very much. You just passed agenda item 5A, which this is actually part of phase one. This presentation. We're splitting it up a little bit.
This is a phase one, task one.
This is phase one task, part of phase one, task one, without the tech memo, because you'll see as we go through this, the recommendations I'm making. The idea of this presentation is to provide an overview of how other GMAs and GCDs around the state compare actual data with DFCs. And so, as you can see, and this presentation will be posted on the district's website. There's a lot of information in here for future study. So the idea is that to show you how others are doing it. If it's the kind of thing you like, then we can proceed with doing this sort of analysis for Lost Pines, using data for Lost Pines and the model for Lost Pines. And then I've actually combined this with 5D related to the resolution you have for adopting DFCs. Now, one of the things I always like to do with districts and GMAs I work with is kind of break down the three basic functions as I see them of a district. You're dealing with planning, the joint planning process, which generates DFCs or desired future conditions. You're dealing with management. That's where you set out goals and objectives in your management plan. And specifically, one of the goals relates to DFCs. That's goal 8. And we'll talk a little bit about that. And then finally, regulation. That's your rules. How do you implement your management plan? So always think of these 3 steps as you're going through it, because a lot of times people think planning is the same as regulation, and it's not. There's a process and some steps involved here. Now, a little bit about my experience. I don't know a lot of you, but from 09 to 11, I was the director of the Groundwater Resources Division at the Water Development Board during the first round of DFCs, the first round of joint planning. That first round was unique because the board staff provided technical assistance to nearly all the GMAs in the state. And we had, and I took the lead on 9 of the 15 that we were dealing with. After that, our budget got cut and the board stopped doing technical assistance, so I went back to consulting. And I've been fortunate enough to work with a lot of GCDs and GMAs related to the joint planning process for the second and third round. And for districts, that I also do a lot of management plans, including this evaluation of DFCs that we're talking about tonight. So just as a little bit of background, these are the GMAs I've worked with. In this, most of them are in the second and third round. In 13, I only did the second round. And these 4 districts are good examples of how we deal with how to implement DFCs in the management plan. Go ahead.
Would it be possible to turn that screen just a tiny bit more? It's pretty over here. Thank you.
We tried these screens and the projector, and this is the only one we can get the thing to work. I'm afraid, I'm sorry. I'll go through examples of 3 of these. I won't do Kinney County because that's a spring flow. It's got some unique aspects to it. But the other 3 are drawdown based DFCs like the ones here. So as you know, in a drawdown DFC, you can express it any number of ways, and various GMAs do it all these ways. The GMA-wide average, the GCD averages, county-wide averages, aquifer-wide by model layer, GCD aquifer or county aquifer. So these are all different ways to express averages. And what you do is these predictive runs with the GAMs, you're essentially looking at increased pumping as compared to historic. Well, that's pretty common. That's the way GMA 12 has looked at it. And so what you look at is these GAM runs with the increased pumping are a way to quantify impacts of that increased pumping. You're going to decrease groundwater levels. You're going to increase inflow to a particular area, including induced surface water flows. And you're going to cut off, you're going to decrease outflow, including capturing base flow from rivers. And so the GAM outputs include simulated future groundwater elevations associated with all this. So this simulated drawdown is calculated as the difference between 2 groundwater elevations at a baseline and at the end of the run. You do that for every single model cell. And basically all you're doing is averaging all the cells in a particular area of interest to get your average DFC. So here's an example. Here's a real simple grid, 5 by 5, 25 cells. And in the middle is the biggest drawdown, 10 feet, and it kind of radiates out from there and decreases out from there. Well, the average of all 25 of these is 5.2. But you don't have a monitoring well in every one of those. You only have monitoring wells in these, so now your average is 6.6. So how do you do that comparison? That's the challenge here. So you want to compare simulated drawdown with actual drawdowns. Well, you can calculate a drawdown in a single well. If you have a monitoring point at the beginning of the period and at the end of the period, that's your drawdown. Well, that well is in a specific location in the model. You can compare that with what's actually in the model at that point. So here's an example in GMA 11 in Rusk County, the northern Carrizo. And I'm using the 2016 because this is where we developed it. So here's the average drawdowns in the Carrizo for each county in GMA 11. And let's kind of focus in on this area. You'll see that we're at the intersection of Rusk, Nacogdoches, and Cherokee. So we have 6, 14, 32. Now, one of the misuses of DFCs is that somehow that 6 is the same everywhere in Rusk County. The 14 is the same everywhere in Nacogdoches County, and the 32 is the same everywhere in Cherokee County. Well, that's not true. That's the actual drawdown, all these squiggly lines. But those are hard to kind of interpret. The blue circle is the area of interest there. So we can see that in Cherokee County, there's a lot of heavy drawdown further to the north that's influenced by the pumping in Smith County. Rusk County is that little bitty area, and then Nacogdoches a little bit more. So what we're interested in is what's the drawdown in that immediate area, and the actual average numbers don't really mean anything. So here's how the model grid is laid out in Rusk County. And when you look at Rusk County, we had 86 wells with monitoring data. So we extracted those point estimates from the model to compare with the actual data. And we get this, where the plot is, along the x-axis is the actual groundwater elevation from the monitoring data. The y-axis is the simulated groundwater elevation from the model. The slanted line means it's a perfect match. So you've got some that are above the line and some are below the line. The red area is where the DFC elevation is greater than the actual. The bottom is where the actual is greater than the DFC. So we had to look at this also from the standpoint of rainfall. Remember, these DFC runs are all assuming average drawdown, or average recharge. Never have average recharge over any length of time, but that's a standard assumption that has to be made. So we look at the water level changes during wet and dry years, and we see rises in wet years and drops in dry years, not surprising. So we plot up the real water level differences with the rainfall, we get a nice relationship. And what this tells us is 76% of the variation in water levels is due to rainfall variation. Pumping doesn't have as much to do with the up and down as the rainfall does. So we have to factor that in when we look at these data. So let's look at another one that goes a little bit further. Out in Fort Stockton, in the Middle Pecos GCD on Pecos County. And this is in the Edwards Trinity Plateau and Pecos Valley aquifers. So here we're looking at, first we want to see how good is the model to do this. So here's the measured groundwater elevation on the X, simulated groundwater elevation on the Y. The red dots represent individual points where we have data. And the black line represents a perfect one-to-one fit. So this, sort of like a calibration, this is pretty good. We can use this with some confidence. When we look at the predictive period, 2006 to 2019, remember that this is only from 1930 to 2005. This is the calibration period. Now we're extending it and looking at the predictive period from 06 to 19. Again, it's landing fairly well on the line, a little bit high, a little bit low, but basically in line. We have these wells that we have actual data for with the 2005 base point. That's the baseline for the DFC. And so we develop a table of how many wells each year, what's the average measured drawdown, what's the average simulated drawdown. And then we plot this up and we see everything's, the black line represents the DFC, the decline associated with the DFC average for those points where we have data. And the red line represents the actual data. Well, we see it drops below that black line for a while and it pops back up. That's during a drought. We see the same situation with the rainfall increasing, or you get a larger recovery or less of a drawdown when it's wet. You get a bigger drawdown when it's dry. And we have factored in the pumping. Pumping actually was the highest in 2011 when that drop started. Now let's look at it on a GMA-wide basis, GMA 14. The second round of the joint planning, this was kind of a classic example of what the criticism is reverse engineering, and this one is where it's true. They ran the model once with estimated pumping, here's the drawdowns, and a petition was filed. So in the third round, we really tried to avoid reverse engineering anything. We tried to avoid what I call project-based simulations and focus more on aquifer capability runs. And we looked at GMA-wide DFCs, not these individual, who's doing what. And so that resulted in a GMA-wide DFC that said that there will be no less than 70% median available drawdown remaining in 2080, or no more than an average of 1 foot of additional subsidence. So this is applied everywhere. So what does that mean? Well, I work for Bluebonnet, GCD, one of the parts of GMA 14, and as part of the evaluation of this new approach, we looked at it on how we would go about then translating that generic statement into something the district board could adopt as a DFC to put into their management plan. So part of that was to we looked at all the data points that we had available to us, and it's quite variable. Montgomery County, Harris County have a lot of points. Some of the smaller counties not so much. We looked at the differences. This is where we simulated minus actual drawdown for the period. And you can see most of them skew positive, which means we're fine on the DFC. You can break it down by county. So this was done as a way to kind of see from a compliance or a comparison standpoint how things were going to look. So to summarize, we adopted a DFC. The adopted DFC expresses an average drawdown for a particular county aquifer unit is really just a convenient summary of impacts of increased pumping. In and of itself, the number is not terribly meaningful because it covers the entire area, and that doesn't match up with your monitoring data. So when you compare the actual data, you need to do it by point kind of comparison, not an overall average comparison. And then you have to have good coverage, and you got to deal with the recharge assumption. It's not average recharge. And the pumping in some years may be higher than what is expected, maybe lower than expected, because that's going to be in relation to the weather too. Now it's very important to keep in mind, these are planning numbers. You update these DFCs every 5 years. They should not be viewed in concrete. Updates to DFCs are going to be based on a number of factors. And ideally, these will include monitoring data, they'll include improved GAMs, and updated improved management goals relative to future pumping increases. If you'd like, I'll go on to the next one, or we can stop and answer questions.
I guess best to just stop right now and ask questions on that first part.
Sure.
Before proceeding. Any questions on that presentation?
Good.
Okay, like I said, the idea would be if that kind of approach is appealing, then I can essentially adopt that or use that approach with the GAM simulation results and the actual data, and put something like that together and go through the normal staff, committee, and board process as needed. Okay.
Is that the approach you recommend?
Yes. Like I said, that was why I wanted to spend a little time explaining how I've done it in other places that seems to have some success. And Russ County had started off, they actually started off doing the squiggly line thing, and they found a problem because one monitoring well they didn't get a reading on one year, and it screwed up all their averages. So they were looking for some other way of doing it. And that's how we kind of got into developing this approach, which has proven to be a lot more meaningful and helpful in translating it into management plan actions and rules. Thank you.
I have one question.
Oh, sure.
Well, I was only here for 1 year, the 5-year timeline on the last one, and it just seemed like one of the complaints was at the end that a lot of things were not being taken into consideration at the GMA, like things like decreased spring flow or
Right.
proximity to a growing urban area and lots more people moving. You know, there were a lot of like sociological things. And are you already going to start working on the next 5 year now?
Yeah, the next round of DFCs, you have to propose the next DFC by May 1st of 2026.
Right.
So 3.5 years from now. So I assume that I'll be invited to participate as the Lost Pines representative for technical stuff on GMA 12. And, you know, we just go from there.
We typically have 5-year contracts, or that's the max.
5-year
Contracts. with-
Oh, for the consultants?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
So you're probably good.
I'm good.
Is a motion required? Is some sort of motion required here? No?
I would just say the direction I've received is adequate to move ahead with. I didn't want to be presumptuous and work all the data. If it was something that you really like the old way, I wanted to at least get this out there so y'all can see how I think it's a lot more manageable.
Yeah, why don't we just have a real quick motion for the record, so we'll have our.
And Elvis, you
Sure.
actually have a public comment with 5A.
Yeah, I missed that one.
Just put what I'm missing.
Yeah, I was gonna try to fix that up. Yeah.
I spoke with Andy Weir, and he said it's okay.
Okay.
But he wants to make sure he's called for 5D and 5H.
Yeah, I'm gonna get
Okay.
any relief for 5D. Okay, so can I hear a motion?
So moved that we approve Mr. Hutchinson's approach to the next time cycle.
Okay, you're in a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion passes. Next item on the agenda is 5D, and we do have a public comment first.
Oh, you want me to go?
Yeah,
second?
Andy's got to go first. And I apologize, Andy, on 5A. I got all kerfuffled and
Not your fault. I was outside, so I wouldn't have been responded if you had called me.
Okay, so for 5D, you got the floor.
Oh, and so, as I understand the agenda item, and it's in your board packet, you have to adopt the desired future conditions with the model of available groundwater that was issued by Texas Water Development Board. I spoke on this last month. I just would urge you, as a board, you voted to reduce the desired future condition, the average drawdown in the Simsboro formation. Your target was 183 feet of drawdown, and that was not approved at the GMA 12 level, and they set it at 240 feet of drawdown. And then there was a discussion at GMA 12 that says, you know, after this is settled, you may, as a district, you may adopt a 10% variance, either 10% less or 10% more than that 240-foot drawdown level. And so, though it's a 5-year goal and it's highly unlikely you're going to get to 240 feet of average drawdown in the district, just in keeping with the board's sentiment, with what they had approved earlier, would recommend that in this, as you adopt these numbers tonight, that very first page of your resolution has the 240 feet in the Simsboro, that you just make a motion and edit that to say 216 feet of average drawdown in the Simsboro, so that it's consistent with your intentions, and it goes into your management plan. And just so that there's some history that that's your intent. And the recommendation for that, following up with your, you know, we're talking about the Colorado, and remember what I spoke about last month, the Hooper Formation, the Simsboro, and the Calvert Bluff formations, all sliced open by the Colorado River right there. Currently, the Simsboro Formation gives water to the Colorado River.
especially when there's rainfall and a recharge. In the future, if you drop the pumping, if you increase pumping to a certain point and that average drawdown exceeds, and I don't have the exact number, but as that average drawdown gets deeper and deeper, the aquifer will not give water to the Colorado. It will suck water in from the Colorado. And so you've heard about the wastewater that boring company wants to put into the Colorado right there at the exact spot where the water is coming and going, you know, where the aquifer is sliced open. That's where they want to dump the wastewater. And then you also have this recent report from Environmental Stewardship saying you've got these persistent, PFAS or whatever, PFAS contaminants in every tributary right there. This is where Will Barker Creek comes in. You heard Chip speak to that. So you've got contamination right there. So if you allow pumping to take the average drawdown so deep that the aquifer starts sucking water in, then you're going to take all of that pollution into the aquifer. And that's the water supply for City of Bastrop. You permitted them last March for 8,000 acre feet right there. They'll be sucking that water in. And so there's implications to this. The DFCs do matter. I recommend that you take that 10% variance and maintain that as a process for DFCs this next cycle. Thank you all very
Ed,
much.
do you have a question?
Yes,
Did
ma'am.
you say that you were at the GMA 12 meeting where they said that we could have the 10% variance after after the DFCs were voted on? Because, or not? Were you at that meeting, or did you hear them say that?
Yes, ma'am. So Brazos Valley GCD applied a 10% variance increase in drawdown and pumping in their district. And Post Oak Savannah Groundwater District applied a 10% reduction in their drawdown to the Carrizo Formation. And we were hoping at that time that Lost Pines would submit the 10% variance in the Simsboro. Mr. Westbrook at that time stated it's better math to do it after. And so he surveyed the GMA 12 members and said, am I clear that that rule is okay, that if we take a 10% variance after Water Development Board issues the approval of the DFCs and the modeled available groundwater, the MAGs, that we take that 10% variance? And the other members of GMA 12 said, yes, we understand that that is your prerogative. So, thank you.
Spoiler alert, I'm a wet blanket on this, I'm afraid. This is a real simplified chart of the process, where we start with proposed DFCs by the GMA, which then leads to each district having a public comment period, which then leads to reports that go back to the GMA. The GMA adopts the DFC, submits the resolution, the explanatory report, and the model files to the Water Development Board, who then reviews them, issues a letter of administrative completeness to the districts, which then trigger the event that we're talking about today, the district's adoption of the DFC. And then finally, it's a parallel thing, the model available groundwater report. So that's the basic steps that we're talking about. Now, this district adoption of the DFC is something that was new in 2011. It did not exist in the first round, only in the second and third rounds, as well as the explanatory report and the letter. This was changed because of the petition process. In the first round, petitions were filed against the GMA, and the lawyers didn't like it because the GMA is not really an entity. So as part of the sunset bill in 2011, when they added the explanatory report and all that stuff, they added this part where the districts have to adopt a DFC because that gave a specific target to file petitions against. So this GCD approval is now the triggering action, and the clock starts presumably tonight, 120 days for someone to file a petition against the reasonableness of the DFC. Now, there's three basic approaches to how folks adopt DFCs in the GMAs I work with, and I listed them there. Some do it as a simple agenda item. Motion, second, adopt, that's the end of it, it's in the minutes. Most districts, including the way you're doing it, is with a resolution, a written resolution that lays everything out. And the third is, it's a written resolution, but with a report. Now, in Blue Bonnet, we had to do a report because it was a unique setup with the GMA-wide DFC, and how are we going to implement it at the district level? So we wrote a report for transparency and documentation, and then backed it up with a resolution. So this is a copy of the report, and anybody who wants copies of this report, just let me know. I think Jim has some of them that I've put up here. And we have this summary table. Similar kind of thing that y'all have here. Aquifers, counties, drawdowns. We've added, subsidence on this. Now, this is from the GMA 12 resolution, where they talk about this variance stuff. There's this possible difference between model drawdown results and the DFC drawdown targets, and they claim it's within the 10% variance and then give all the reasons why. Well, let's look at the origin of this. The Water Development Board has guidance documents on how to submit groundwater availability model runs for aquifer assessments as part of this process. And there's a link here, and this is from page 2. The staff has to be able to replicate the approach and the assumptions used in the DFC run. They have to recreate it. It's science. You submit all this stuff, and they have to come up with the same answer as the consultants. And the answer here are average DFCs. Going further on to page 3 of that same document, you have to describe the methods, the methods to employ and how to calculate. All this stuff is laid out, that the idea is to give them enough information to recreate what the GMA's consultants say it says. Now, at the end of this document, it says, what happens after I submit my model runs or aquifer assessments? Well, they anticipate there's going to be requests for clarifications. They're not going to get the exact number because they didn't either understand or it wasn't well documented how the averages were calculated. So they have the option of sending out a request for clarification. And as part of that, they have recommended in the last little box variance assumptions. So basically they're saying if it's within 5% or something of what the consultant has provided, that's good enough as a match. And they want that built into the resolution, and which is done for GMA 12. Okay? So this is really, they're trying to match these average drawdowns between the DFC resolution. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, you're using the term variance.
Right, difference.
And, okay, statistics, there's all kinds of variance. 95% confidence interval, standard error, standard deviation.
Right.
So what are we talking about here?
Difference. In this instance, they use the term variance assumption. And so in their mind, they're giving the example of 5%. In the GMA 12 report, they're using 10%. And so the idea here is that when the Water Development Board runs the model for the GMA 12, if they're within 10%, if their average drawdowns are within 10% of what the resolution is, they call it good. Even though they should get the exact number if they follow the same procedure, right? So this is part of their administrative completeness or quality control check. Now, historically, some GMAs, they've had trouble. And so now it's fancy to call it a variance assumption. It's really a fudge factor. They've really just said, okay, we're not going to spend too much time worried about exactly how you calculated it. If you're within 5% or 10%, we're going to call it good without getting too far into the weeds with it. if the GMA consultant has documented things correctly and done the calculations correctly, the numbers should match up exactly. And so that's what they require to give all this documentation. But now they're saying, well, don't worry about it so much. Just give us the fudge factor. And notice that all this is in the guidance document. It's anticipating it in the request for clarification. This difference, variance, whatever you want to call it, was never intended to be anything other than a quality control check and a fudge factor. There's nothing in Chapter 36 or the administrative rules of the Water Development Board as a means for the GCDs to adopt anything other than the DFC in the resolution. There's no provision for variance or changes or anything like that. There's nothing in the statute, Chapter 36, or in the rules to provide any means for the GCDs to adopt or consider any kind of variance related to the MAG. The MAG is just simply issued by the board. It's sent to the district. That's the end of that process. And you all have to use it as one factor in permitting decisions. So once we get that report, that's the end of the process. Technically, you don't even, I mean, you can review it and we can talk about it, but there's no action required. There's action required on the DFC, but that's only because there has to be something to file a petition against. These are the numbers that are in your resolution. These are the numbers that came out of the GMA 12 resolution. These were the DFCs that were adopted by GMA 12. These are the ones that are applicable to this district. And unfortunately, statute says these are the ones you got to adopt, period. Failure to do that or making any changes, in my non-legal opinion, exposes you to petitions because you're not following the process.
Well, and I think our legal opinion says the same thing,
Well,
that we have to adopt.
Mine's more of a practical, on the ground, doing a lot of this around the state for a lot of years. That it just doesn't work the way some have said.
Well, we appreciate the explanation.
Mr. Hutchinson.
Yes, sir.
Because the DFCs for our district were adopted by GMA 12, we're stuck with them no matter what. Is that correct?
That's right. There's been a lot of talk about what would happen if a district refused to take this step. If they didn't like them and they just refused to adopt them.
In your opinion, what would happen?
That exposes you to a petition to TCEQ that you're not doing your job, which is different than the petition for the DFCs not being reasonable.
And what would be the, if that were to happen, what's that to us?
There have been only a few examples, and I think Greg and Natasha can speak better to the penalties, but they have a lot of ability to compel you to do certain things up to the point of dissolving the district.
Greg, do you know of any districts that have been penalized in that way for rejecting the DFCs adopted by the GMA?
I'm not aware that any district has ever done that. There was one situation where the district's adopted desired future condition was petitioned, and there's a whole appeal and petition process that you have to follow. In that process, they reached a settlement agreement with the petitioners that their desired future condition was no longer reasonable for a variety of reasons. And so when they turned in their management plan, they did not include any desired future condition because theirs had been declared no longer reasonable. The Water Development Board said your plan is required to have a desired future condition. So therefore your plan's not administratively complete. They kicked it back and told them to redo it. they went all the way to mediation with TWDB and finally reached a resolution where they would include the prior desired future condition. And we have asked now for 2 separate sessions for the legislature to pass a bill to resolve that problem. The solution proposed to the legislature is that you should continue to use any desired future condition, whether it's been declared reasonable or unreasonable or whatever, up until the point a new desired future condition is adopted. But that hasn't passed the legislature yet, so we still have that problem. So that the number one, the desired future condition itself can be petitioned. Number 2, if a district refuses to adopt a desired future condition, there are several different options that might follow. I think number 1, that they would probably go to the petition process. Number 2, they might file a lawsuit, the writ of mandamus, to order you to do what you're required to do. Number 3, and by petition process, I mean the petition to TCEQ that you're not an operational district because you haven't met a mandate in the law to do something. Now, if I can editorialize here for just a moment, our petition process, our challenging and desired future conditions are all look back. And it doesn't make any sense at all. It takes you 3 to 5 years to get through that petition process, and then there's litigation following that. By the time you get done with the process, you're already well into the next round of planning and the next adoption of a desired future condition. I would urge everyone, and as I've been urging the legislature, to change that process. Make everything forward-looking. We know what the desired future conditions are that were approved by the GMA. Let's do our best to get those adopted and implemented. But let's talk about what we want to do next time for the next round of planning. Now is the time to get that done. One of my biggest gripes about this process is that the public comment process comes 4 years into a 5-year process. You have 9 factors you have to analyze. Somebody could walk in during the public comment period and say, hey, I have the perfect desired future condition, and everybody could agree with it, and you have 0 time to analyze the 9 factors and adopt that as a desired future condition. The public comment should come at the beginning. People should talk about what they want the desired future condition to be. The GMA should analyze whichever options they want to look at during that process, and then finally adopt it at the end. And right now, the beginning of the next 5-year process, right now is when people should be talking to their GMA representatives and trying to get a proper DFC for the next round of planning. And again, one last comment, it's a 50-year goal. You've already shown an example where someone dropped well below that average and then brought it back up. I'm not the greatest lawyer in the world, but even I can argue if after 5 years you drop below that average, but I can show you we have a plan to get it back up there before the 50 years is up, guess what? I think I win that lawsuit. I think that's a perfectly reasonable DFC and a reasonable plan to achieve that DFC because it's a 50-year goal. So if we want to set shorter goals, we can. You know, for the best example I have, we got spring flow where you can tell when you're not meeting the spring flow goal because the springs dry up. So you can set shorter goals as part of your DFC. Just be careful you don't tie your hands too tight, or you're going to end up in court on other matters. So I'm sorry to editorialize for so long.
Thank you, Greg. Well, it really sticks in my craw to be forced to adopt a resolution that we opposed and be forced to do that. And I'm going to let it go at that. Thank you.
Natasha, would you like to, anything you'd like to say?
I think Greg summarized it well.
Okay.
There are discussions at the GMA regarding the variance, and that is true. However, our review of the statutes and the rules don't provide for any kind of after-the-fact adoption of a variance. And I've consulted with the counsel for Brazos Valley, and she also agrees with that position. So I think the appropriate step is to work on the next round versus, focusing on what the prior position of the board was.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Do I hear a motion then? Should we move on to the motion?
Well, I don't really want to make a motion either, but I would move to approve the resolution adopting the DMA 12 DFCs for the relevant aquifers in the district as presented.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Hearing a motion and a second. All of those in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed?
I abstain.
I abstain.
Okay. See that Director Cheryl Smith and Director Phil Cook have abstained, so the vote is 8. So the motion passes. Moving on to E. E will be discussed in executive session. We're going to be deferring that to the end of the agenda. So we'll skip E and we'll move on to F. Discussion, consideration, and possible action on establishing a policy on communications between consultants and legal counsel and the board. Natasha, would you like to speak on this policy?
Yes, so Director Rogers had asked for us to work on a policy establishing basically the form of communications between the directors. Oh, you can't hear me. Sure. My nickname at home is surround sound, so it's rare that I have to visit the microphone, but Director Rogers asked that we work on a communications policy to facilitate a process for communicating from the directors to legal counsel, and also a process for providing direction to the lawyers so that you didn't have multiple directors giving input and directing the lawyers to go down a task, to run down a task. This is what that does. There are some amendments to what you got initially in your packet. That's on your desk. Those amendments remove the application of this policy. They remove the other consultants and also the lobbyists. So this would purely be communications to your lawyers. What the amendments also remove are any references related to procurement or retaining any lawyers or consultants. So it is streamlined down to only communications. So if you have any questions, I can answer them.
Any questions from the board?
Yes. And Natasha, was this vetted through a committee?
It was not, and that might be a reason you want to table this and bring it up again, so have committee input. That would be fine.
Would a motion be in order to help?
Yes. If there's no further discussion or questions.
Well, there would be a motion and a second, then discussion, I believe.
Okay.
But if you'll entertain a motion,
Yeah,
I'd like to make
sure.
one. I move we table this motion until the new amendments and edits have been put into this. I have quite a bit myself I would like to put into it. Rather than hashing through it at the meeting, I think I can submit these to you for consideration that way. So I so move that we postpone consideration of this item.
Is there a committee
Is there, yeah, I was going to
So
think
the
the
management
governance committee?
And refer to the governance committee for vetting and comments.
Okay, so I hear a motion to table this item and pass it to the governance committee for further evaluation and updates.
Did you get a second?
A second? Is there a second to that motion?
I second.
Hearing a second. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, that motion passes. So next up on the agenda item is item G. Discussion, consideration, and possible action on the legal services contract of Gregory M. Ellis, attorney at law. And I'd like to start that. I was initially confused because there actually are two contracts with Mr. Ellis. There's one contract for his lobbying services, and then there's this other contract that's for everything else. So my understanding is that this contract is for non-lobbying legal matters. And it's an update, it's a renewal of an existing contract that's already in place.
That's correct.
The fees did go up, but all the fees for all of our services this past year have gone up for everything. So, any discussion on this item from the board? Any questions?
I move that we approve Mr. Brett Ellis's updated contract.
Okay, your motion to approve. Second to that motion. All those, yeah.
I just have one question, Greg. On your contract, it says that you can hire associate counsel and paralegal services. They retain through outside contracts and will be billed at the same rate, blah, blah, blah. So would we get any prior notice of that, or?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, well, obviously I already have a paralegal. I've got assistant that I work with on. If I have to bring in outside counsel or something, I will let you know.
If you brought in outside counsel, would we get to weigh in on that before you hire?
Absolutely. The only reason I can see that happening is if there's something going on here and I absolutely cannot be here, then I would want to have someone in my state to step in.
Any other questions? So we've had a motion, a second. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? No, hearing none, the motion passes.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay, H will be deferred as well. That's another item that's going to be discussed in executive session. We're going to move that towards the end of the agenda. Also with I as well. That is another similar item that we'll be moving towards the end of this agenda, and we'll be meeting in executive session. So that brings us up to J, which is the committee reports with possible board discussion. No action will be taken. First is the Financial Services Committee, and there's no update. We have not met since the budget which was approved, so there's no updates from the Financial Services Committee. Next would be the Governance Committee.
Yes, the Governance Committee met the first week of the month, and some items that were discussed is the General Manager was reminded that staff evaluations were due at the end of December, and his is due in February, and evaluations must be done prior to any pay increases. We also briefly discussed the communication policy that Kay brought up, Mr. Ellis's contract, and we also discussed RFPs for audit and the webpage. Mr. Hernandez suggested that they be delayed. However, we don't want to forget about them, so I'd like to see them on the timeline at some point. That's all I have.
Next up is the Infrastructure Committee, Director Coe.
Well, the good news is that on December 21st, we bought a new building in Giddings for our district headquarters and meeting room, stuff like that. And I think we're real pleased with that location and the building itself. It's going to have to undergo considerable renovations to make it suitable for our district needs and stuff like that, which will require a request for proposals. We need to broadcast that for contractors to make the proposals on that. We haven't done that yet. We're in the process of getting a proposal together. And but we haven't done that at this point. The Infrastructure Committee met on January 4 at the building. That was Billy, Herb, me, Elvis, and Jim met there to get a good look at the building since it was in our possession. And we sat down and had a meeting about the initial proposal for the renovations. And I've done some with some feedback from the committee, and Jim, I've done a second draft of that and in the process of doing a third draft, and we hope to get that done as soon as possible.
Okay. With that, Director Arsufi, the Education Outreach Committee.
The Education, nothing much to report, although I'm going to highlight, Jim included a flyer for the Texas Well Owners Network is coming to Bastrop County the end of February. I think this is a tremendous program for people to get their wells tested And also, they have an educational program that is excellent.
Thank you. Next up is the management committee, Director Cole.
We met on the 11th, and Natasha met with us and advised us on the issue of the 10% variance of the DFCs, giving us her legal opinion that the districts must adopt what the GMA has adopted. We also looked at the LRE proposal and came up with advice to the board on adopting their proposal. A timeline was developed by Elvis, and we discussed that. It was decided to use a timeline as a model to adhere to when able, with the possibility that the management plan may be delayed in adoption. After receiving the MAGs, there is technically a 2-year window before adoption is required, but an adoption of the management plan by the end of the summer would be an option, if not by May of this year. Natasha had given us a final draft of the rules, and the substantive changes were individually discussed, and the committee recommends adoption as presented.
Thank you. That's item J. So next up is agenda item K, the general manager's report.
Mr. Chairman, before we get to that,
Sure.
I want to compliment the chairman on the reports that they just gave to their committees. Unfortunately, in minutes of prior meetings, this is not necessarily been made. And I would like to see the report that they gave, what they did, and so forth. I'm in a situation right now. The committee talked about this and did this. No, we didn't. Yes, we did. No, we didn't. And so I'd like to see some of that there presented to us
In the meeting minutes. And also, I know Director Cole writes up meeting minutes, and she's reading off of her minutes, so perhaps we can use what she writes up.
That would be great.
Because she's reading off of your minutes. So we can, perhaps that could be the standard for the other committees as well. Okay. Next up, the general manager's report. Mr. Totten, no action will be taken.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. I will try to be brief in light of the fact that we still have some extensive executive sessions ahead of us. For the reporting period through the end of December 31st, 11 new wells were permitted through the district to exempt domestic wells. 5 wells were gauged, no water quality tests were performed. Approximately 48% of Lee County is reported to be experiencing abnormally dry conditions. The rest of the Lee County has dropped out of drought conditions according to drought.gov. Bastrop County, approximately 2% of the county is in moderate drought, and 81% is considered to be in abnormally dry conditions. So the rainfall has been more favorable up in Lee County than it has for Bastrop, but either way, it's still a marked improvement from where we were. This is tangentially related to GMA 12, so I'm going to stick it in here because it came in late. We have received feedback regarding the management plan that was submitted to TWDB. I've forwarded the comments over to Director Cole as under her purview as on the management committee. We'll look at making the changes that they've recommended and then moving forward on the process to finalize that management plan. GMA 12 itself has not been active since the last board meeting. Towards the middle of December, the district did make the final transition over to the HAF database. So we are now working out of the HAF database rather than DB Stevens. Currently have staff working on reconciling the district records with the TWDB well records. We found when we put those side by side that TWDB had wells that we didn't have, so we're trying to match those up and make sure that we've got all of those wells accounted for. Once we get that process done, we'll move on into doing QA/QC on water quality and production data to get that completed as well.
Could the link be updated on our website, the well database link?
Yes, sir. I thought that had been done, but I'll take care of that.
No, it's not. It's just going to.
That's going to, well, down to the
not found.
Okay.
Yeah, page. Yep.
Yes, sir. I will get that corrected. Let's see. During in late December as well, I did have a conversation with the faculty member at Texas A&M that set up the BV Water Smart program, which is a water smart residential irrigation notification system. They send out weekly emails telling people how much to run sprinklers based on rainfalls and other climatic information. I just wanted to get some general information about what kind of data we might need or what kind of costs we might have if we wanted to bring a program like that down here. It's a quick and easy outreach program. I will put that over to Dr. Arsufi though and get him in touch with Dr. Kaiser, and we'll start looking at that to see if that's a program that we want to pursue here. Let's see, as Dr. Arsufi mentioned, we do have the flyers for the Bastrop Well Owners Network that came in. We'll get that up on the website along with the press release from the Ag Extension Agency. There's also another well owners program that's being conducted virtually that we'll get up on the website as well. I believe it's through, strangely enough, the EPA, but it's being run through the rural water agency. I can't recall the acronym, but we'll get that information on the website as well for anybody that wants to participate in that. As far as pending permits, we do have the same pending permits that we've been working through since November. We're currently in the process of getting notices of deficiencies out to the applicants to get anything that was overlooked in their applications corrected so that we can move forward on finishing the processing of them. At this point in time, I'm not aware of any upcoming meetings, but we will notify you if there is anything that may be of interest either at the GMA or the regional planning level. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, any questions? All right, with that, thank you, Mr. Dunn. Brings us to JKL, discussion.
President Hernandez?
Yes.
So we had a hydrogeologist report also under the general manager's report. I don't know if you were still going to cover that tonight.
Jim, is there anything?
That was.
Or is that specific to LRE?
Yes, sir. That was at Alan's request. He wanted to have the possible standing agenda item if they wanted to address the board on project updates or things like that. Something that I forget about. So.
All right, thanks. I thought it was Jim. This was Jim's item. Okay, H is hydrogeologist report. Mr. Shandon.
Good evening, board. Just wanted to update you on the status of your permit applications. There was 4 permit applications submitted, or actually 4 people that applied for permits. Aqua, Thomas Turfgrass, Manville, and Gatehouse. All those permits have been reviewed. I've used the district rules established in November 16th, 2019. And the district has a permit checklist that I used and I've modified a little bit. So I've gone through, there's about 25 items on that checklist, and I've gone through about the first 20 of that. And all these permits have some sort of deficiencies, some of them minor, some of them more major. I'm planning to have this finished, and I'd like to work with the district manager and the district lawyers and kind of come up with something to present to you next month. But I'm going to give some guidance on this and from the board members on, I'd like to submit these applications back to the applicants with addressing the issues of the first 20 items. And then part of this, all these, is involving doing GAM runs. And so I'm requesting that the board approve that we submit these applications back to the applicants to address the issues, the deficiencies they have in the first 20 items before we do the model runs. And some of the issues are the maps, well, construction information, and pump test. So, and I won't get into specifics right now.
Jim, I thought we delegated that to you because you are a contact person for our hydrology. I thought that you did this. I didn't know he did it.
No, we worked through it together on this. And Alan he has a different approach from what we've done in the past, and he just wants to make sure that he's in bounds on the approach in terms of separating, not doing the modeling until we get everything else done.
That sounds wise.
Which, if we can, yes, ma'am. So I certainly agree with the idea that we just, as you said, some of these deficiencies are very simple. We just get those cured, and once they're cured, we can turn Bill loose on the model to get the model results. I think that was what Alan was really looking for in that. So,
Do you need do you need us to vote to give you that authority?
I don't believe you do, no
I
ma'am.
don't think so.
The only outstanding issue is, I believe we created a separate task item for general hydrologic studies that wasn't necessarily in their presentation to the board. But we can, I don't believe we need an action on that.
That's my thought too.
Just to review, the aqua permit was 4 wells for 12,098 acre feet. Thomas Turfcraft was 4 wells in aggregate for 3,950 acre feet. The Manville, which involves 2 wells, was for 3,064 acre feet. And then the Gatehouse is 10 wells, 3 of them already drilled, and 7 we're looking for drill permits, and for a total of 45,000 acre feet. Yes, sir.
Will the major issues you discovered, will that take very long to remedy?
Possibly, yes. Yeah, it could involve more pump testing for some of the applicants. Yeah. And some of the pump tests are very dated, some are 12 hours, 14 hours. Some of the applicants are asking for a lot more water than the pump test would. And so there's a couple of issues.
So are you looking for a motion from us tonight?
I guess I'm not looking for more, I was mainly looking for guidance. So, and if you've been looking for your comments right now.
Sounds good.
Sounds good.
And also, I wanted to kind of standardize this. So all these applicants are kind of following the same format. And so they're very, very different. The organization was very different. And you have guidelines, and you have, the checklist that you had previously, that the district constructed. And I've kind of revised that a little, put it more to go in line with your organization and your rules. So it's easier to follow. So it's just here to hopefully make this process a little easier in the future so we can do it much faster. That's the goal.
Sounds great. I think everybody. Thank you.
The legislation.
Next item, L, discussion of Lost Pines Groundwater Conservation District legislation,
That's what it's-
related legislation and/or activities occurring that affect or pertain to the district and groundwater. Mr. Ellis.
Okay, good evening. Again. If you wouldn't mind, let's go ahead and open up item H at the same time, if that's permissible. Item H is the proposed legislation specific to this district. Is that okay, Natasha?
It's fine, but Andy Weir has a comment on H.
That's correct. Andy here does have a comment on H.
Let's have Andy go.
All right, Andy, you're up.
L and H.
Yeah, we're going all over the alphabet.
I was happy to see this in the packet. I will be working with Senator Cocor's office on this legislation also, and didn't have the concrete suggestions that Mr. Ellis and Grant, the staff there at the office, came up with, but I was looking forward to seeing this document. Highly supported, speaking on behalf of SAWDEF, which works with landowners in Milan, Burleson, Lee, and Bastrop counties, really support this. The only thing I would add, if it's possible, and you know better, Mr. Ellis, than I, is that what we're seeing in the Carrizo up there in northeast Lee County, there's probably 5 wells that I can think of that possibly in the next 5 years might have to be re-drilled. There's no way you can lower the pump low enough in that well to where they can stay in water. And so the good news on that is you're talking a very small number of wells. So the expense for that is limited. You're not talking about re-drilling everybody's well in the county. But re-drilling a well is not one of the options that's in this piece of legislation. So under section A, 1 is you can reduce the pumping in the aquifer or subsection of the aquifer. 2, you can provide reimbursement for someone to lower their well. Is there a way that we could add 3, reimbursement for drilling a new well? And the caveat to that is, let's go back to when the DFCs were established. So the first round of DFCs, and I need help with this because I don't have the exact history and I didn't look it up, but I'm assuming 2012 or first round. We had 2017, 2015, what is that? 2010. So that's probably the first time that the district promulgated a notice. If someone was savvy, if a well owner was educated and savvy, they would have known that the water level is going to drop in their well. So if we went back to that time, so if the well was drilled before the adoption of that first DFC, that well would be eligible to be re-drilled under this mitigation policy. And that's a limited number of wells. That's really going to limit that. It's highly unlikely that you're going to have to drill that many wells, because what you're doing with the DFCs and the monitoring is you're keeping the artesian water level in those wells casings high enough to where people can just drop their pump and stay in water. There's a few wells, and it's right there in Lee County, where the Carrizo, and these guys will verify that, where the top of the Carrizo is much higher than the rest, and it's right there at the end of 411. And so those wells that are at the end of County Road 411, the water level is going to drop below the top of the aquifer right there. And so those people are out of luck. They didn't do anything wrong. Everyone else is going to be able to drop their pump, stay in water. But these people aren't. And so is there a way and those people drilled their wells in 1990. They didn't do anything wrong. So they could fall under this 2012 or before 2010, and you get that added to the policy. Is that too much to ask for? I'll let you answer that, Mr. Ellis. Thank you.
Not a question I can answer. Okay, going straight on to item H in the proposed legislation, which I think is a more important topic here. This is a very tough nut to crack. To start with, under the standard common law of Texas, we follow the rule of capture. The rule of capture means if your well goes dry, it's your tough luck. It doesn't matter what your neighbors did or what they didn't do. It's your responsibility to drill your own well or lower your pump or whatever you want to do. The courts have said no liability to your neighbor for whatever you're doing, and no liability from your neighbor to you, or whatever you've done is if it dries up your well or drops the well levels below your pump level. So that's where we start from. The second part of that is we have a constitutional provision, Article 3, Section 52 of the Texas Constitution, that prohibits the use of public funds for a private benefit. I'd like to say that was put in there in order to keep county commissioners from using their road crews to build roads out to their ranches. And so, that's the tightrope we're having to walk on this issue. What I have done here in this draft is I am trying to propose that where you're trying to make more water available to everybody in the aquifer by allowing the aquifer levels to decline over time, then it is a public benefit to help those people who are impacted by that to lower their pumps. I didn't put in drilling new wells there. You can add a third one, drilling a new well if necessary. First off, I didn't realize that there was any place in that area where the wells, the Carrizo got so high that you actually are going to be out of water. It's going to be water table conditions if it drops down far enough. But secondly, Jim, what's it cost to drill a Carrizo well typically in Lee County?
I think the current rates right now, you're looking at, it's gotten close to $30 a foot, so you'd be looking at math that I can't do in my head right now. 45, that sounds about right.
$35,000. So, that's obviously a whole lot more than just dropping a pump. So if they put that in the bill, then you're volunteering to include those costs in whatever program you put forth. I want to mention to you that Senator Colcourse has stated that she is dedicated to getting the problem solved, working with us and filing a local bill. I've heard from Grant almost more than he's heard from me, which is not typical.
And so there's a lot of interest there. Representative Giddings, who is the new state representative for this area, and is part of this area, has also stated that he's going to follow Senator Colcourt's lead on this issue. But I also want to let you know that Senator Perry, who is chairman of the Senate Water Committee, has stated that he wants to have a statewide solution. He wants to find some sort of funding mechanism and put in, if not requirements, I hope not requirements, but certainly options for districts to use. And I don't know what funding mechanism he's going to come up with. I don't know if he wants to use export fees, if he wants to use the production fees, if he wants to use property taxes, whatever. And I haven't seen a draft bill come out of this, certainly nothing's been filed yet. So there may be a statewide bill that comes through as well. We just want to make sure that our local bill is not inconsistent with or would cause any kind of problems for other people across the state who are trying to solve the same problem. So you have the draft legislation in front of you. You're welcome to change this any way you want to. I do recommend President Hernandez, we need to get a legislative committee appointed of less than a quorum of this board who can work with me and answer questions for me on a within the next hour type of basis. As we go through the legislative session, there are times when we have to negotiate amendments. Someone brings us an amendment to it. Sometimes it happens in the middle of a committee meeting, and I need to get an answer back from somebody, and you're not going to have time to call a meeting and get a quorum. So we need to have somebody who can speak for the board on that. We would want to put it on the next agenda item so that the full board can ratify whatever decision they made, but I need to get some action quickly. So a litigation committee would be very, very helpful in that effort. The draft bill would have to be sent by the staff to legislative council for drafting. In fact, they've already started legislative council on drafting a bill. They don't have one back yet. They have about 10,000 bill requests in the House right now. It's probably going to hit about 12,000 by the time they get through the end of session. We're going to see somewhere between 6,000 and 7,000 bills actually filed. So some of those are, a lot of those requests are committee substitutes and other amendments to bills that are counted in that list of things that legislative council is working on. So whenever it does go in, it's going to be added to the pile of stuff they've got to get done. The good news is there's no filing deadline for local bills. The bad news is the later it gets filed, the harder it is to get it through the entire process before the end of session. They have 140 days, and we're already just over a week into those 140 days. We have to get it. The same bill has to pass both houses, out of both houses committees, be set on the calendar, heard on the House or Senate floor, and passed. In my experience, the Senate is generally there to pass bills, the House is generally there to kill bills. We get it filed both in the House and the Senate. Maybe we can get them, whichever one's moving faster will be the one that makes it through. So that's my recommendation. This is the recommended draft. If you want to add in item 3, or if you have any other change you want to make to this, we can ask for whatever we want to ask for, whether or not it passes. And I promise there's going to be some changes when it comes out of legislative council, and whether or not it passes constitutional measure, I can't promise that. I don't know. We have to, if somebody files that lawsuit, we will have to make whatever argument we can to try and defend it. And the good news is, if it's a statute, we have the Attorney General of Texas on our side. It's his job to defend all statutes passed by the state. So, with that, take a vote on that. You want to move on to item L at this point, just talk about general legislative stuff.
I didn't hear anything that we needed to take to vote on.
Well, I'd like to get approval of this draft.
We're going to talk first in executive session.
Okay, that's fine.
And then we may vote on it after executive session.
All right, then let me mention that obviously the legislature is back in session. Yesterday, the lieutenant governor and governor were sworn in for another 4-year term. The week before that, Speaker Dave Phelan was reelected as Speaker of the House. I don't see any huge shakeups in the House committee chairmanship, so I expect Tracy King to be back as chairman of the House Natural Resources Committee. I don't have any special insight on that. That's just the best guess on my part. Anything could happen. If they offer him calendars, I bet he takes it. So you cannot chair both. I don't think that's going to happen, though. I mean, one of the big fights that they had over the rules in the House was over whether or not the Speaker could name members of the minority party, in this case the Democrats, to committee chairmanships. All of those rule amendments did not pass, most of them killed on a point of order. So I expect about 1/3 of the committees to be appointed with Democrat chairman, including Tracy King from Uvalde as chairman of the House Natural Resources Committee. But maybe not. Well, the speaker does whatever the speaker wants to do in this matter. The Senate, I've already spoken to you about the Senate committee's interim report, which came out in December. The House committee report came out today, and there are 19 of the 35 pages in the report, I think, are on groundwater. There are about 2 pages of recommendations that have been made. I haven't even been through all of them yet. So groundwater is going to be a big issue for that committee this session, and I expect every one of those recommendations has already been sent to Legislative Council and asked to draft a bill. And the committee chairman's going to be either filing those bills or finding other members of his committee to file those bills. The committee obviously has not been, no chairman have been named, no committees have been named. That's going to happen in about, I think in about 2 weeks. It sometimes happens right before February, sometimes it happens sometime the first week of February, and that's when the real work gets started. They really don't start hearing bills until about mid-February, and that's about the time I expect our local bill to get filed. It's about that same time frame. I'd be happy to answer any questions you have about the general legislative. Other than that, my report's complete.
Any questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, Director Smith, did you have executive session planned at this point or after Emma?
All 3 of them, E, H, and I, we were going to break now for executive session.
Correct. Okay, so
Everybody has to leave.
the board will break for executive session at 9:04 p.m.
And pursuant to Texas Government Code 551,
Okay.
.071, or any closed session permitted by law for consultation with its attorneys. There you go.
And
Now it's official?
What's that?
I'll say, before we run everybody out, I know we have more than normal, but there is the staff development room connected to the conference room. It's not a traditional space, but it may be big enough to accommodate us without running everybody out, or would you rather just?
Okay, so we'll try to,
We can
for the
see.
board members to go to that other room?
If it doesn't work, then we'll come back in and ask everybody to step outside. Okay.
Melissa and I talked. Yeah, we were going to stay here.
Okay.
What I'm hearing is that the board will stay here.
Okay.